if I can. Okay. Can everybody see my presentation here?
Yep, it's up. Thank you.
Okay. Can you see it as it is without like a table of contents on the side? Does it
No.
look? No.
Nope, you're not in presenter mode.
Probably like slideshow and then start at the top.
Or up, yeah, up at the little icon
Okay.
that looks like a screen.
Slideshow.
Then from the beginning, yeah, at the perfect.
Okay. Does that look good, everybody?
Looks great.
All right. Thanks. I'm really excited to be here and to be able to talk to people about forest management options for private landowners in Lake County and in Cook County as well. And even, whoops, across the state, maybe there's some landowners here that own property that are, it's not in the Arrowhead region. A lot of these points of discussion that we're going to have are applicable statewide. So I'm really glad to talk to everybody. So private forest management, why is it important? Sustainable forest management has a significant impact on a lot of things within the woodlot, wildlife habitat, carbon sequestration, clean air, clean water, soil conservation, recreation, aesthetics, forestry products that circulate within the economy are just a few things. And private lands are especially important because there's a greater risk in these areas for conversion to other land uses. For example, development and agriculture. You can view public lands almost as if they were in a, an easement or some other kind of long-term conservation status. Private lands are more subject to being developed or being maybe converted to an agricultural land use away from forestry. They're also susceptible to more threats that are out there, such as insects and diseases and climate change and wildfire, because they aren't managed to the degree that public lands are. So our role here at the Soil and Water Conservation District, and the way that we can help, is we can connect with landowners and meet with you and encourage active forest management. And active forest management comes in a few forms. Primarily woodland stewardship planning, which encompasses the entire property that you own, can be considered for recommendations in having a plan for management. But there's also a lot of situations that come to light where you're just doing specific project planning. For instance, if you know that you want to do some tree planting on your property, or you have a certain insect and disease situation that you want to address. It could be spruce budworm or emerald ash borer is creeping around the corner. Some of our neighbors down to the south, oak wilt is a problem. These things require management to address those problems. And SWCDs across the state were designed to help you, manage for those situations. Those situations are expensive, so you're going to want to consider the option for cost share funding for not only planning, but for project activities such as tree planting and timber stand improvement and other activities, invasive species, soil erosion, trail maintenance, things like that. We can also connect you with excuse me, tax relief options that are available throughout the state, and we'll talk about that a little bit later. Broadly, the Soil and Water District can assist you with implementation strategies. So if you want to do something, if you feel like you need to do something to manage your land, we can come up with, a plan to help you accomplish that. So just starting, the most logical step is looking at property-wide management planning, which means a woodland stewardship plan. This is something that, it addresses, it's a total resource conservation plan for your property. It's not specific to a certain problem, but it takes into account your entire land and the resources there. Why would you want to do that? There's lots of reasons. You may want to improve your woods, but you don't know where to begin, which is where many people start. They have property, but they don't know where to begin in managing their property. So they want to understand, the cover types and the different types of habitats and the potential of their property. Maybe where you want to begin, and how you want to proceed, but you want additional ideas of how you can improve your woodlot that you might not be aware of. That's where something like participating in a woodland stewardship plan and having a professional out there might be able to give you some insight on some different options that you haven't been able to consider. The stewardship plans also provide a schedule. Timing is important with forest management, and when and where you should do the work on your property is critical. The stewardship plan can provide that for you. The stewardship plans also open a door for property owners to participate in tax relief, and there's two particular programs that we can discuss that landowners are eligible for once they have a stewardship plan for tax relief. These are incentives that award private landowners for managing their properties in a sustainable way. So woodland stewardship plan, how do you qualify? How do you get it? Well, you need 20 acres of non-agriculture and non-developed land to qualify for a stewardship plan. Anything under 20 acres is not eligible. Once you get a stewardship plan, in order to maintain that credential, you need to have it renewed every 10 years. And that can be done by contacting the DNR or your Soil and Water Conservation District, or if you've had your plan done by a private consultant, that's the most logical source to go back and see if they can renew your plan. But you want to make sure that your plan is written by approved DNR plan writer. These plans are going to need to be registered with the DNR in order for them to be valid. And if they're not, then you won't qualify for some of these tax relief programs, such as 2C, which is a lower taxable rate on your property, or SFIA, which is an acronym for the Sustainable Forestry Incentive Act, which is an actual cash payment on your property, which isn't technically an easement, but it can be viewed as an easement because you're committing to your land being managed as a sustainably managed forest property for a certain amount of time. and we'll also discuss that in a little bit. Private forestry consultants mostly write these plans. There's quite a few different consultants out there that you can contact. I'll give you a resource for that later. SWC employees can also write forestry plans. DNR, private forest managers will write these plans. It's hard to pin them down, and us as well, because our time is taken up doing other things. We also would like to prefer that the private industry gets preference for writing these plans, just because we don't want to take money out of their pockets. But you can expect, once you write a plan, SWC, Woodland Stewardship Plan fees, and it is a fee for service basis. We follow DNR's service fees. So that would be $7 or at $350 flat rate plus $7 an acre. And you might find that if you shop around with private consultants that they may charge less or more. Here's just an example of what you can expect. I don't know if you can envision if this is your property, but once once you start your woodland stewardship planning, your land is broken down into separate cover types. You know, it could be open field, it could be aspen, birch forest, and maybe a cedar forest. Every land and every parcel is different, of course, but the forester that's writing your plan will break your property down into different cover types, and then that forester, that resource manager, will make recommendations and scheduled activities that are tailored to your goals as well as the potential of your property. The federal government, so the Woodland Stewardship Plan is a state program administered through the DNR, but the Natural Resource Conservation Service, which is a federal government entity, also has their version of a stewardship plan, and it's called a CAP. It's a conservation activity plan. So this is administered by the Natural Resource Conservation Service. This is something that you, as a landowner, a private landowner, can apply for to receive an incentive payment to get a stewardship plan through the Natural Resources Conservation Service. This is cost shareable through their program for incentive payments to landowners. It's called the Environmental Quality Incentives Program, or EQIP, EQIP. It's very similar to the stewardship plan, but there's additional criteria in there for their requirements. It's typically written by NRCS staff or someone that they award credentials to. And that person can be a private consultant. It could be an SWCD employee. They're commonly referred to as technical service providers. Much like the Woodland Stewardship Plan that you received, the DNR, this plan is also used to qualify for tax incentive programs in our state, that being 2C and SFIA, the Sustainable Forest Incentive Act. So the tax incentive programs that we have, I guess I'll start with the Sustainable Forest Incentive Act. It's administered by the Department of Revenue and partner with the Department of Natural Resources, and it provides an incentive payment to encourage sustainable use of forest lands among private landowners, which hold roughly half of the land mass within our state. So it's a substantial amount of property that that requires attention and management. Having these tax incentive programs, it's an encouragement to landowners to be able to manage their property in a way that is sustainable. The prices vary depending on your commitment. I believe the commitments are between 7 years and 50 years that you can have your property in this program. And that time commitment dictates the amount of money that you're entitled to every year. So it could be anywhere between roughly between 10 and 20 acres, depending on your time commitment, which is taxable. The land that you have within SFIA, during your commitment, it can't be developed or converted into agriculture. There's an 8-year minimum enrollment and a 50-year maximum enrollment. There's a deadline for applying for these tax incentives, which is September 30th. So if you have an updated woodland stewardship plan for your property, which is over 20 acres, or a CAP plan that's been developed for you by NRCS, you are ready to go to be able to benefit from this program. The other tax incentive program in Minnesota is 2C, which is administered more locally by the county assessor. Once you have a stewardship plan, then you are able to submit an application to have a lower tax rate, which is 0.65% of the property value. This is also an annual enrollment, and the deadline is a bit different from SFIA. It's May 1st. Yeah, and again, you need to have a stewardship plan or a CAP plan to be eligible for that. So that's what you can take advantage of for project-wide, your property-wide assistance, having a total resource management plan for your property. But more and more lately, it's becoming increasingly evident that landowners, they need project level assistance. So why would you seek assistance for a woodland project that's specific to your property? There's lots of obvious reasons. Maybe in the best case scenario, you have a woodland stewardship plan and you want to implement it, and there's recommendations in your stewardship plan that you want to see to completion. But if you don't have a woodland stewardship plan that outlines, what you should do, you may also want to do, you may see an evident need in your woodlot. Maybe that you see that the forest has declined because of some insect disease like spruce budworm that's rampant in our area, or you see deer browse and a lack of diversity in your property because of that. This project level assistance can help you acquire financial assistance to address that. So if you have an idea for a project, but you don't know the best way to complete it, and you have a forest health issue, then there are avenues that you can tap into to help you out. An example of project level assistance would be to increase tree species diversity in your woodlot. There's a lot of maybe aspen, birch monocultures that have been managed like that throughout the last several decades, and you are seeking to incorporate some long-lived conifers. Well, we can develop a plan for you to maybe, just for example, plant white pine transplants and install tree mats to increase moisture and limit weed competition, and then put tree enclosures around those transplants to protect them from deer and rabbit depredation. it's pretty standard that you're going to need that in order to propagate, diverse forest types. Another example would be that you want to address a situation where you have insects and diseases on your property. I think everybody here probably is aware of the the spread of spruce budworm over the past 10 years. A lot of people that are requesting assistance through our office, they're doing it because of that. That's their motivation, because they see that the forest is dying within that cover type, the balsam fir cover type and the spruce cover type. So there are, plans and resources, financial resources that we can tap into to mechanically or manually, by cut piling and burning, treating the dying balsam fir that's infected with spruce budworm. And then that is going to promote the healthy growth of residual stand crop trees by removing that competing vegetation or that stagnant vegetation. One more example that is increasingly a problem in Lake County is the control of terrestrial invasive species, specifically buckthorn. So here's a recent project that Lake Soil and Water Conservation District implemented, where the landowner was able to acquire cost share through NRCS's Environmental Quality Incentive Program. They cut, piled, and burned buckthorn that was greater than or equal to 1 inch in diameter. That cut vegetation was immediately treated on the stump. On the bottom photo, you can see there's some dye that's evident of herbicide, which is necessary to control the spread and the regeneration of buckthorn. And as another measure, the material that's less than 1 inch in diameter is treated with a foliar spray of herbicide. These activities, they need to be replicated multiple years in order for there to be some success with controlling this invasive species. So the programs that we have and the resources that we have is a good way to get landowners started on the right path. Financial assistance, I alluded to that, pretty often here as I've been speaking. And there are 3 different sources that we rely on to implement conservation in Lake County. There's state cost share that's administered through the DNR, federal cost share, which is administered through the Natural Resources Conservation Service, and local capacity cost share money that we ourselves hold the purse strings to. So, the state cost share is probably the easiest funding source to get cost share through, but it's also the least funded source. Statewide, they typically have between $600,000 and $800,000 annually to award landowners projects. And it gets used up pretty fast. But if landowners are welcome to apply for this program anytime, and the turnaround for the awarding funding for asks is pretty quick. Woodland stewardship plan isn't required for landowners to get funding. Typically the acreage, there's no minimum or maximum, but typically the acreage for landowners is between 3 and 50 acres for these cost share asks through the state. When you do participate in this. A forester will prepare your project plan, and roughly, and this is, I emphasize the term roughly, through the state program, 50% of the cost of your project could be reimbursed to you after the work is complete. So the process, I'm going to describe this process for applying for, state cost share. But this also applies to, this model is consistent with state cost share and also local capacity. So if you're interested in taking advantage of this, you would contact the DNR cooperative forest manager, forester, or a soil and water conservation district staff, and let them know you're interested. We would then discuss what type of project you're thinking of doing. Then someone will come out and walk your property and develop a plan for you to address your resource concerns. This plan would be submitted with a cost share application, which would hopefully result in funding for your project. Once you're funded through a contract that you sign and agree to, you would complete the work by yourself, or you would hire it out to a contractor, and then DNR forester or an SWC staff member would inspect the work and certify that it's been completed according to the project plan. Then you would get reimbursed the money that's in your contract. I included a link down here if you wanted to follow that or write that down for cost share funding. Also, the cooperative forest manager with the DNR, his name is Thor Paykov, a lovely gentleman. His phone number is here. If you call him up, he'll be able to help you, and he'll be able to work with the soil and water conservation district as well in accomplishing your goals. So that's the state. Federal cost share programs that we work with are, there's a few of them. We almost work exclusively with Natural Resources Conservation Service, Environmental Quality Incentive Program, their EQIP program. This is a program that has a pretty substantial incentive payment for implementing forest management practices or projects relative to the state cost share. They also administer a program called the Conservation Stewardship Program. Separate from that is the Farm Service Agency. They have a cost share program called the Conservation Reserve Program. So we'll talk about that in a little bit more detail. The EQIP program, the Environmental Quality Incentive Program, this provides technical and financial assistance to landowners for conservation practices that protect soil and water quality. So they're not really, they don't have to be specific to forest management. There's many agricultural practices in there that that a landowner can look at. Given our area, we of course have a lot of forested land and not a lot of ag land, so we were able to take advantage of the few forestry practices that are in this cost share program. The process, again, is very similar to the DNR process. You would contact an NRCS employee or a SWCD staff, discuss what kind of project you're thinking of doing. Then someone would come and walk your property. We develop a plan. We would work on an application, try to secure funds for you. Once you complete that project per your plan, then you would get a payment that's made to you. I included some contact information here. There's a web link under here that you can go and get some information online. You can contact NRCS directly. The district conservationist in our area is based out of Duluth Service Center. Her name is Allison Prayett. But you can also contact the SWCD office, and we can facilitate any assistance you need with NRCS if you prefer. The other cost share program that's federal is Conservation Stewardship Program. This is a program that rewards participants for participating in existing conservation performance. So these are things that you've done already, that would be documented, that you've done to improve your property, or that you've done to address a natural resource concern on your property. And this is also administered by the Natural Resource Conservation Service. These programs require a 5-year contract, and there's an annual payment to a landowner based on their previous year's performance. The more that you have performed on your property, the more your natural resource conservation that you've implemented on your property would equate to a higher payment. When you do enroll in CSP, you're required to adopt at least one additional enhancement or project on your property. We don't deal with this directly through our office right now. That could change, of course, but we could facilitate your interest and put you in contact with the Natural Resource Conservation Service if you feel that this is a good fit for you. So the last federal cost share program I want to talk about is administered through the Farm Service Agency. And this is really more oriented towards agricultural properties. This is something where a landowner would receive an incentive payment by taking marginal cropland out of production and converting it into wildlife habitat, which, you know, would be grasses or trees, something of that manner that's not a rotating crop. In order to be eligible, the land that's taken out of production must have been planted 4 out of the last 6 years. In order to be considered for this project, it's competitive, so you will be ranked with other properties in your area for resource needs and priorities. You can apply for this at any time. And to apply for this, again, you can contact us, or you can call your local Farm Service Agency Service Center. And here's the contact information under here. If you'd like to take a note, his name is Aaron Paul, and he's based out of Duluth. Lastly is our cost share opportunities. Lake, soil, and water, we have local capacity money that's very limited, that we can, if we have a project that comes across our office that is in an area that meets a lot of our objectives, that addresses our water planning concerns, then we could pay careful attention to it and consider some kind of limited local capacity funding for it. And that can range from a percentage of the total project to a fully awarded funded project. It's a case-by-case scenario. We also have an annual tree seedling sale every spring, where we sell trees to landowners. So be sure to look for the order form on our website, and be sure to get your orders in early, because planting stock goes very quickly. timber sale assistance is something that we don't really handle within our office, but we can defer you to people that do. The DNR, they have foresters that can appraise your timber and send out bid announcements to buyers. They do have a service fee of 13% of the sale value. Once they award a contract to landowners, then they can't do any additional work with you because of conflict of interest. If you decide to go with a private consultant, then they'll do the same thing that a DNR forester does for you, which you're able to negotiate their service fee, and they are able to administer the sale when cutting begins, and they can recommend loggers to you in order to get your project completed. There are an awful lot of sources of information out there for landowners. I just wanted to share some of my favorite ones with you. Firstly is My Minnesota Woods. This is a University of Minnesota extension program. They have an excellent program for private landowners. It's called the Master Woodlot Owner, where you can take a series of courses to learn about how to best manage your woodlot in a very broad sense. They have resources there for tree selection and care, and they have just a continuing awesome wide array of education opportunities that any citizen can go and participate in. Another resource that I particularly like to offer to private landowners is the Woodlands of Minnesota Landowner Handbook Series. This is a statewide handbook that the DNR has developed that's specific to different kind of eco regions. So in our area, we live in the Superior Highlands or Superior Uplands, I believe. Apologies, sorry. So, you know, these handbooks, they explain your property in a landscape setting. So the information on the past and present condition of your forest. It really emphasizes the natural processes that have formed your property and how those natural processes have been impacted by human activity, particularly climate change. So I think that this, if anything, I just love this publication because it lets you know when to step in, when to let nature take its course. Because as a management recommendation, you know, legitimate management recommendation is to do nothing on your woodlot. You know, it's a perfectly legitimate thing to do, but it's not always the best thing, especially in our times here with human impact and climate change. And you may want to know when it's okay to not let nature take its course and to do some active management. This book is a really good guide for you to frame your thoughts around that. One more source of information I'd like to share is you know, this sustainable forestry guide. It's a real good kind of beginner's crash course on helping you understand forest terminology and the different terms that are associated with forest management within the context of our landscape. Sources of information, tax advice. This is something I always get asked because we're talking about cost share opportunities and you know, cost share opportunities means that you're getting a payment, and oftentimes those payments have the potential to be taxable. Gary Seafrost is a person that I've never met This is not even his picture. I just Googled Gary C. Frost and an astronaut came up. So apologize for misleading you to believe that Gary C. Frost is also an astronaut. He's not. But here's his information. He is knowledgeable in forestry taxes, so anybody can contact him and utilize his knowledge. You can get involved. There are a lot of up and coming opportunities for people to get involved regionally. One is in our area, at least on the North Shore Lake Superior, is the North Shore Forest Collaborative. Their mission is to, promote this boreal forest that we have up here and perpetuate the ecosystem of native tree species that are associated with our forested communities along Lake Superior. Another way to get involved is by becoming a member of the Minnesota Forestry Association. They really advocate for family forestry. And it's also a good source of information. You could become a tree farm system. If you want to go that route, that's a nice little credential to have. Nice way to let the world know that you're managing your property. And that's it, you guys. Thank you for listening to me, and please let me know if you have any questions. I'll keep this slide up in case you want any of the links that I've had in my slide. If you weren't able to jot them down, or even if you don't want to, you can always consider me of the Soil and Water District, as an avenue to connect you to all these other resources. We can have a really informal meeting and talk about your goals and, get you to the right people to help you manage your private forested land.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Tim. That was really good information. I learned quite a bit as well.
Thanks.
So we had a couple questions. This was already answered, but so we learned that to have a stewardship plan, there's a minimum lot size. Was it 20 acres?
Yeah, it's 20 acres. And I think it's a maximum acreage of 5,000.
Okay, but even if we don't have a woodland stewardship plan, there are programs. Equip, is there, there's other options for smaller lot sizes, correct?
Yeah, you don't have to have a stewardship plan to be eligible for these project specific plans.
Okay.
So if you have a resource concern on your property and you don't have a stewardship plan, if you're concerned about that, please don't be. You can have a specific practice plan to address your project that could be cost shareable through all three government entities: local government, federal, and state government.
Okay, perfect. And then another question, is there a specific preferred time of year where project assessments are performed?
No, there isn't. The federal programs are those that cost share is awarded annually, but site visits and applications can be submitted anytime during the year. DNR, the state cost share has a much faster turnaround. You can apply for the funding and you could very quickly get awarded funding for your project, but the funds are much lower on a state level, and I think the cost share rates are not as robust as the federal programs. That's not to deter anybody from applying for a state cost share, but I don't deal with that as much as I do with the federal cost share through the EQIP program, because it isn't as robust.
And those equip applications are usually reviewed in the spring, is it? And then there's a couple funding rounds, or is it kind of unpredictable?
Yeah, you're reviewed during the winter time and awarded in the spring.
Okay,
So we had just got finished, NRCS just got finished with accepting applications this fall. So they'll spend the rest of this winter time evaluating and ranking the applications, and then they'll award contracts to applications that meet the criteria in the spring, April, May.
okay.
So,
And then if there's funds available, sometimes they do another round, correct? So we
yeah,
can put in applications at any time is kind of what I'm saying.
yeah, it's a really good point. Sometimes they have 2, 3 different rounds of funding because money gets shuffled around on a national level, and sometimes it comes back to the state. So just because you don't get funded during this year doesn't mean that you're completely out of the loop for consideration. There's always hope on hope that you're going to be funded, because there might be an additional round of funding coming through.
Okay. And then another question is, how did the budworm infestation look this year? There was a comment that it didn't appear there was many worms, moths, or webs. And did you see that pretty widespread, or was that, pretty typical as normal years? Was there any difference this year that you noticed?
I don't think so. It's pretty typical. The spruce budworm, it goes on 30-40 year cycles where it's really, really bad and there's an epidemic like we're having. But the degree of defoliation varies from epicenter to epicenter. When I say epicenter, they're like localized infestations, because they are very localized. So you might see one spot where the trees are completely defoliated, within that 30-40 year cycle. And then you might just travel half a mile away and you'll see another epicenter that's in a different stage of defoliation where the trees look like they're not as bad. But I think that the take home point is, surely in these defoliated areas, there's not really a whole lot of hope for the fir to survive. The bugs are in there, they're going to eat themselves out of house and home, meaning like it's a buffet. Once the food is gone, they're not going to be able to feed and support their populations. So the bugs are going to die and the tree's going to die. So it's kind of a red herring, to have hope when you see that, unfortunately.
And are you seeing it spread? I mean, is it kind of increasing in span over the years?
I don't know that for sure.
Okay.
There's a lot of, with the advent of aerial photography and LiDAR, we have a lot more information about infested areas, but the bug itself doesn't travel on its own. And there's nobody really transporting this wood. There's not like a lot of people out there transporting balsam wood for firewood. So this infestation, they tend to outbreak and stay in areas historically in the same spot. They don't really travel around and infect areas outside of their normal infestation areas. The reason why we're having such a such a hard time here is because our forests aren't managed properly. We don't have an economic revenue for balsam. It's not being harvested. There's nothing that mimics something that would require this type of tree to be in a natural state. It's a fire dependent species, and in the absence of fire, in the absence of timber management, we're just going to stagnate, and we're going to remain diseased. So it's a hard thing to address. It's an expensive thing to address, and it's a lot of the work that the Soil and Water Conservation District here in Lake County has been taking on.
Yeah, pretty devastating. And then another question is, can you develop trails within woodlands and still qualify for a stewardship plan? What kind of management can you do on your property with different, probably each program will have a different qualifier as far as how much you can do, but can you speak to that a little bit?
Yeah, there's nothing in the stewardship plan that limits the amount of recreational opportunities that you create. Trails, landings, food plots, all that stuff is perfectly adaptable and incorporated, very often incorporated into a stewardship plan. And it doesn't make any difference with tax incentives either. The biggest bugaboos are, development, building structures on your property, parceling out your property. Those are the things that are going to affect your registered woodland stewardship status and your tax incentive status if you have that.
Do you have any favorite resources to learn more about spruce budworm? Any good websites that you've seen or?
Yeah, Minnesota Extension has a really good, like a really brief 2-page documentation on spruce budworm. That's where I get just the bulk of my knowledge from. It's just those 2 pages. It's really concise, and addresses the current state of spruce budworm activity in Minnesota. So if you just Google U of M Extension spruce budworm, you'll get that publication. What I like about it is it really breaks down the difference between their preferred food source, which is not spruce, it's fir. And then it has some anecdotal evidence that the spruce is not, it has a much, it's not as browsed heavily as the fir. So the spruce has a much greater chance of surviving these pandemics.
Okay, well, that was all of the questions in the chat. If anyone has any final questions, they can put them in a chat or even speak up.
I just want to say that I think, Tim, your presentation tonight was extremely complete, very listenable, if that's a word, and hopefully very useful to people that have woodlands and are trying to figure out what to do next. So thanks a lot for that.
Thanks, Ron. It's good to see you.
You bet.